Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and if my voice sounds a little hoarse, it's because I am still recovering from Manifest, the future of logistics that took place in Las Vegas over the last week. Yeah, last week. So here I am about 5 days later, about 4 days home, trying to recover from email hell and lack of sleep and just getting back into a regular routine. But we've got a few stories that I want to hit on today, including Super Bowl marketing and Google entering the AI arms race against Microsoft and ChatGPT. But first, like we typically do with these shows now, let's play a clip from FreightWaves Now. I do a weekly appearance on that platform every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And these were the topics that we talked about with Kaylee and Anthony over on FreightWaves Now. And then we're going to dive in a little bit deeper. So let's go ahead and cut that clip in.
Talk about like the best marketing ever, right? Like Manifest has like the puppy room, the Super Bowl has the puppy bowl the day before the game. And this is the perfect segue into what we're talking about today is Super Bowl marketing, which it feels like it's the biggest game of the year, right? Does it really need marketing help anymore?
100%. It's one of those events that people actively tune in to watch the commercials. It's one of the few games of the year, or really the only game of the year, where you are actively watching just to see what brands are going to show off their commercials. I mean, brands spend millions of dollars. They spend an entire year planning these campaigns. And now we're sort of entering the realm of, okay, brands are deciding, am I going to advertise with the Super Bowl or am I going to advertise on social media while everybody is watching their phones and watching the big game at the same time? And that's what we're kind of seeing with a couple of different collaborative efforts. FedEx is one of those companies where they are collaborating with musicians in order to have them create different songs over on TikTok. And then that way they will use that information and pick one person. We don't necessarily know yet which musician that they're going to pick, but then to show that one musician over on the actual Super Bowl ad. So they're doing some collaborative efforts with social media and also the big game.
And Blythe, one of the big things that I saw last year was some of the really popular, talked about commercials and ads. And so do you think any of that's going to make its way into this year? Any kind of trends? I know one that kind of comes to mind was when there was just a QR code on the screen.
I was just going to talk about that.
Yeah, that was a huge one. Do you think anything like that will be seen this year?
Sure. So that was the Coinbase ad that everybody kind of just raved about because it was so simple. It was so just simple. And that's what I think a lot of folks are craving for, is that you can have these big production efforts, but sometimes being a little weird sticks out more than everything else that you're seeing. Now, with respect to that Super Bowl, we saw a lot of the fintech, a lot of the crypto monetization or companies spending money on those commercials during the Super Bowl. We're probably not going to see that this year because of the crypto crash. And so we're going to be moving a lot of marketers. A lot of these ads are already being released on Ad Week or not Ad Week, but Ad Network, I believe is the phrase. And so if you go to their channel, you can see all of these different commercials that have already been released. And a lot of Super Bowl watchers have already been polled. I think Marketing Brew did this study of about 1,000 adults. And they said that they actually don't like that the commercials are being released prior to the Super Bowl. They want to see them live, and they want it to be kind of like a spoiler-free event where you can watch these commercials live and experience them all together, which, I mean, sports in general is one of the last few things that you can watch together and experience live together, both in person and at home.
So, Blythe, I've got to wonder right now. We talk about what's trending and kind of meeting the consumer where they are when you're talking about advertising. On TikTok right now, there's a lot of this influencing trend, and people are calling it recession core, right? Like, not necessarily the spend your money with us, but the kind of like, okay, let's look at our consumption habits and let's maybe change the way that we're being marketed to. And I think a lot of that will play out with these big brands, maybe playing on the nostalgia and how it feels to maybe, okay, well, you know what? You're together with your family, like a Pepsi, right? Instead of like the in-your-face, sell you this Pepsi brand this year. Do you think that we could see that as a lot of trend, as maybe people taking, or companies taking a play on this de-influencing, more nostalgic, more time-friendly marketing strategy instead of this so in-your-face salesy approach?
100%, because you kind of see it in movies as well, where a lot of movies, they won't give that movie, they won't fund, a lot of these studios will not fund a new movie unless it has some kind of nostalgia feel to it. It has some kind of a backstory to, or it's been around for a while, because it costs so much money. It's around $200 million at minimum in order to promote a new movie. So a lot of these studios aren't even making that investment. And so on the flip side, if you're going to be making a high dollar investment, which is what a Super Bowl ad is, then you're going to play, or you want to play on the nostalgia feel of it. I just saw one of those, speaking of the previews of the commercials, Clueless, that all the original Alicia Silverstone and the original cast, they joined together to create a new commercial, and I about died, because that was the movie for me when I was a kid. So that nostalgia factor is absolutely going to play a role. And plus, we're kind of, a couple years, quote unquote, removed from COVID. And so a lot of folks are just ready to laugh. They're ready to feel good again. And so that's what we're kind of expecting to see with a lot of the marketing going on this weekend.
I am completely clueless about that movie, so I'm guessing it's something else I have to add to the list. But we're looking at potentially the playoffs for AI. We're looking at Google kind of going up against Microsoft. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. Google has entered the AI arms race with their new tool called Bard, which is it doesn't exactly flow off the tongue per se. But the danger with this is that it kind of brings to light that Google has actually been sitting on this technology for a while, but they were apprehensive. Sundar Pichai, who had a tweet thread the other day, was talking about how they have this technology, but they were just waiting because they were a little, apprehensive about what this might do to the economy. I mean, they're on one side, they're Google, the company is Alphabet, the company is laying off, a bunch of white collar workers. And then they introduce a tool like this that is technically going to replace a lot of white collar workers. So where does that kind of fall in? So they've been resistant to releasing Bard to the general public, but now it's in testing. Microsoft and ChatGPT, their partnership has kind of forced their hand. So now we're kind of just all in on this AI arms race, and that the public is going to kind of be the guinea pig testing portion of it. But then on the flip side, you have all of these publishers that have been creating content online for years and years. And the big question now is which one of these big companies are going to actually partner with these publishers in order to scrape that data, in order to give an answer. There are a lot of, freight companies just in general, their number one and number two strategies as far as marketing is concerned is advertising and SEO. How is that going to affect all of these publishers that have spent years trying to craft these blog posts and these YouTube videos, and AI is going to come in the mix and kind of display these answers without giving those publishers credit? That's where the next sort of like legal storm that we're going to find ourselves in is who is going to partner data-wise with ChatGPT and with Google's Bard in order to display these answers and display this information, because right now there are no citations. There's only one AI powered search engine that is displaying citations, and that's a company called Neva. You pay about $6 a month, and they're doing a rev share with these different publishers like Quora and Wikipedia. But then on the flip side, Google and Microsoft are not, they haven't announced any kind of rev share for the partners for the data that they're scraping from these companies. So it kind of gets into like this legal murky waters. And then on the flip side, we're also, all getting kind of experimented on at the same time with these new AI tools. So we've entered into a new information age, and we're not exactly sure of which direction it's going to go. Some good, probably some bad along with it. All right. I hope you enjoyed that discussion. And similar to how we've done these shows before, let's go ahead and dive a little deeper, especially around ChatGPT, the AI arms race, and then we can end on some fun Super Bowl numbers that were just sent to me today, actually, after my appearance on FreightWaves Now. So it kind of works out pretty well. But first, the AI arms race, and Google enters the AI arms race to compete against Microsoft and ChatGPT. Now, Google, the way that they explain this, the CEO explains, is that they've been working on this for a while, and because they were a little apprehensive about releasing the software out into the wild, as they say, they've been sitting on it for a while, and Microsoft and ChatGPT, I believe, came right out of the gate, with their collaboration, Microsoft has been funding ChatGPT for quite some time now. They're also offering additional funding, especially in regards to the hosting power that is required to operate ChatGPT. Last I heard, it's costing them about $3 million a day. And I'm sure that price tag has increased. Now, since we last talked, I believe that, I'm not sure if I mentioned it on the last podcast, but in this particular instance, ChatGPT now has paid offerings. So if you're trying to access the platform, you're probably noticing some downtime alerts. You're not able to access into the system unless you pay for it now. So I think the minimum plans start out about $20 a month. Then you can go up into higher tier plans, which range anywhere from $40 to $100 a month, depending on the amount of data that you need from them, which they need to then call on from the Microsoft Azure server. Which, data and hosting is just a fascinating space to be in, but it's also the biggest moneymaker for folks like Microsoft, folks like Amazon, Google as well. Processing all of that data takes a tremendous amount of computer power and computer, just resiliency in order to keep those servers up and running. But Google has entered the space with their AI tool is a little bit weird. It's called Bard, which you can tell that they didn't really have a marketing arm or a branding arm behind that name. It kind of sounds like a developer came up with that name. No disrespect to developers, but Bard doesn't exactly roll off the tongue as, say, like a ChatGPT does, or even or just the acronym GPT. So we've seen some screenshots now of how this is going to look with the language model of ChatGPT and now Google's Bard, and how it's going to fit into the overall sort of search ecosystem. And the way that search works, I'm sure most of you, 99% of you that are listening to this, know how search operates. You go to google.com, if you're one of the 1% of people that go to bing.com, then you enter in your search phrase. It brings up a list of queries on where you can find the answer to your question. Now, the way that these language models are going to work is that I've seen it in screenshots on two different platforms. So with Google's system, the way it kind of looks is that you have the traditional search bar, and then you have the Google tabs as soon as, like say images or video or news articles, those different options that appear on the search results page. And then it goes into the articles that are listed, that those articles or those publishers have spent a great amount of time and money on crafting those articles in order to appeal not just to the humans that are going to ideally be reading those results and hopefully getting an answer to their question, but also appealing towards the robots, the bots that are actually crawling the internet infrastructure is probably the best way to put it. But so the way that it works is that you have your search box, you have the additional tabs that Google always shows, and then the list of search results after that. Now, where the AI fits into this is a text box either below the search results, or not below, but below the search bar, but above the search results, which is very important, especially when it comes to SEO. We'll get into that in just a minute. But then on Microsoft's version, on the right hand side, so you have your traditional search results that appear on the left hand side of the screen, but then on the right hand side of the screen is a little box that hopefully will answer the question in much more of a paragraph sort of conversational tone. That looks really appealing from a user perspective, because you're going to these search engines and you're looking for an answer to your question. Now, where the waters are going to get a little bit muddy is, what do you do about all the publishers that have spent years, all of the writers who have spent years crafting these responses, coming up with this information, and you, the data source, you're pulling that information and you're not giving citations for where that information is coming from. That's the biggest problem with AI right now, is that you are not giving it, like ChatGPT. If you ask it a question and it gives you an answer, it is not giving you citations of where those answers are coming from. Now, you could also make the argument that ChatGPT right now is just in an experimental mode, that it's not necessarily going to be able to provide you these citations But that's not really true because there is another competitor that has entered the mix. It's called Neeva, Neeva, and I believe it costs around $6 a month, but it is an AI powered search engine that not only answers the questions of what you're inputting into that search engine, but it gives you additional citations of where that information is coming from. That's the biggest problem with ChatGPT right now, is that you're not getting those citations and that you're essentially skipping the publishers. You're bypassing the publishers who came up with this information, who assembled this information, and you're giving it to the users. So that's where it gets into a little bit of muddy waters, because there's going to have to be some kind of resolution or some kind of a data agreement, a data partnership between publishers and these AI tools. And especially as Google is coming into the mix, Google probably you can make the argument that they have the most data, that they have the most areas for where they can properly cite where they're getting these answers from, that they are showing in their AI, that they're showing in those answers. Because what's going to happen is that the copyright lawsuits, or not necessarily copyright, but also plagiarism, and also just preventing. Let's think about it from the lens of like a Yelp, for example. Yelp has spent years culminating all, or bringing together all of these different restaurant reviews, places to go to, and they're bringing in all of this information in addition to user reviews that were submitted on their site. Now, Yelp has a variety of different ways that they make money, but the primary way that they make money is by folks coming to the site. They get the answers that they need, but they're also being served advertisements. Now, when you bypass that as an AI language model, if you're Bard or if you're ChatGPT, and you are bypassing the way that those companies make money, that's where the lawsuits are going to come into play. That's where it's going to be a lot of legal issues, because you are preventing that website from making money, from capitalizing on the information that they have spent years, sometimes decades, bringing that information together, proprietary information, proprietary data, and you are skipping over those. If you're Google and if you're Microsoft and ChatGPT, you are skipping over those original sources in order to give the correct answer. Now, from a user stand case, if the answer is all there right in one screen, that's great from a user standpoint, but also you have to make sure that it's correct information. You have to make sure that it's right information. And if you're not listing those citations, if you're not listing those sources of where that information is pulling from, then you are preventing the user from knowing whether that data is accurate or not. And so that's going to be the big hurdle that's going to come out from these, because it is a little scary to know from Google's own words that they were hesitant to release their AI chatbot Bard. They were hesitant to release it because they were unsure of how humanity would sort of interact with this type of, sort of information era that we are entering. It's a new information era that we are entering in. And there's going to be a lot of legal. Is it really exciting on one hand, because you can get these really great answers? Sometimes they're not, 100% accurate, but that's where the citations, I think, will come into play. And that's where I think future data partnerships are really going to play a pivotal role in order to showcase answers, give the citations, and then think about it from the lens of, okay, well, what is that next step? What's that next question that a user might ask or a searcher might ask once they've got this one question answered? For example, there was one lady who does a lot of testing for, just creatives in AI, and she was around for the Microsoft GPT announcement. And so she was able to play around with the system. If you want to play around with it, you can go join the wait list over on, I think it's like bing.com/new. Don't cite me on that. I actually need probably a language model in order to cite me on that regard. But she was there live and she was able to test the system, and she asked it, okay, if I go shopping at, this IKEA, or she was using a shopping example, and she said, if I buy this product from IKEA, will it fit into the back of my car? And which is a very reasonable question to ask. It's probably a question that a lot of folks ask, and you probably, with traditional search results, probably not going to get a very good answer from that. But that is a perfect use case for a language model in order to pull in all of the data, the make and model of her car, the dimensions of the car, and then take the dimensions of the product that she's eyeing in the store, and then be able to give her a clear-cut answer on if that product is actually if that product is going to fit in her car. And if it does, she's probably going to drive to IKEA and make that purchase. So that's a good use case of how, you're sort of bringing in all of these data points together. I think that one in particular was used as an example because you're not bypassing IKEA's method of making money. So obviously, if the answer is accurate for her, and if the answer is, yes, this product will fit in the back of your car, you're more likely to go to the store and buy that product. So that's a good use case example of, a shopping site, a retailer site, not getting necessarily dinged probably helped in that regard. But then on the information side of things, that's where the waters are going to continue to get, a little murky. And, as we talk about this, we kind of think about, okay, well, what does SEO now look like? What does search engine optimization look like? And I would make the argument that SEO and advertising are 1A and 1B of the marketing tactics that the majority of freight companies use. And so what does your SEO strategy look like now with these new AI tools? And I got to tell you, I wouldn't change my strategy yet, but I'm also not I'm not investing as much time and energy and money into my SEO strategy now as I once did, 5, even 10 years ago, where, a lot of this opportunity still reigns supreme, where you could find a really good keyword, that has really good high intent, that, if somebody searches for that and arrives on my site, there's a good chance that they either would, follow me on social media, or they would sign up for my email newsletter, or ultimately make a purchase or book a meeting with me. So those, sort of the holy tier of what you want a user to do whenever they find out about the problem that you're solving for them. Now, from an SEO standpoint, I think the days of writing 1,000-word blog article and hoping that it ranks and hoping that folks come to your website and make a purchase, I think those days are long gone. I don't want to say long gone, but they are gone, especially as we enter in this new language model where a lot of these questions are going to be answered right on the search engine results page, and the user has no incentive to take that next step to visit your site. And if they do take that next step, you better hope that you are in that top 5 as far as search engine result rankings are concerned. You better hope that you're in that top 5, or just, page 2 is typically where, your SEO strategy goes to die. But even more so now, if you are not in one of those top results, even with the language models, it's going to be a really tough sell in order to get someone to make that click through back to your site, and then ultimately, follow you on social media, book a meeting with you, all that good stuff. So that's something to really keep in mind, and something that I kind of attribute it to, and I kind of put a little similarities towards when Google introduced snippets into their search result rankings, which a snippet is essentially giving you that same answer, but it's giving you that answer from the actual blog article with the citation. So the way that, SEO experts have gotten around this is that they want to aim for the snippet because that's sort of the holy grail, that's sort of the it's even better than the first result or getting that number 1 spot for that search engine result. If you get the snippet, then you can tailor that blog article to answer the next question that user would have, or potentially would have, or what other questions that user would have. Typically, if you go to a Google search result right now, you put in a key result, or you put in a bunch of keywords, you get your results. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you will see people also asked. And there are several questions that are typically listed there because Google is trying to point you in the right direction in case you didn't find what you were looking for. If you're scrolling through the entirety of the first page, it's probably likely that you didn't find the answer that you were looking for. So Google is giving you those additional questions that people also asked. Now, if I was still really focusing strongly on SEO, that's where I would hedge a lot of my bets, is that people also asked. Because if you tailor, say you have an entire blog article that not only covers that high intent search phrase that you're aiming to rank for, but then if you're also answering those other questions that people also ask, I think that that's going to be a good way to combat this until sort of the legal issues and the data partnerships with the AI side of things are worked out. Now, that's probably a long time coming. That's why I would say I wouldn't change my SEO strategy just yet. But if you're thinking about where you're going to place your bets and place a lot of your money, I would take a little bit of money from that SEO stack and probably put it more into social media, and things like that, because these are the places that people are already hanging out. And if you can put your content where those places where people are already hanging out, you're probably going to have a lot more success long term, and create that content sort of snowball effect of just being constantly in front of people's faces, whether they like it or not. So then that way you don't have to rely on someone going to Google, hoping that they search for that phrase that you are aiming for, and then hoping that they land on your website, and then hoping that they make a conversion, follow you on social, book a meeting, all that stuff, because you're asking that user now to do a lot. And Google and Microsoft are essentially just handing over all of the information without the user having to do a lot more work. So if I'm placing my bets, I'm taking a little bit off of the SEO bet, and I'm putting more onto the social media, the original content creation, and just making content in the places that your community is already hanging out. They like to call it sort of dark social, whether it's social media or whether it's Slack communities or Facebook groups. That's sort of the area of like dark social, word of mouth, screenshots to your friends, things like that are going to play a much more impactful role versus trying to rank number one for that keyword. I think, that especially with these tools now, it's going to be incredibly easy in order to write that. I mean, these tools can spit out 1,000-word blog post based around a keyword, and it's not just ChatGPT. It's essentially the new Silicon Valley right now is all of these AI tools, and who's going to be first to market with a lot of these different solutions. I'm playing around with a few of them myself as far as content is concerned, but that's more on the podcast side of things. But from just the written word side of things, I think that it's if the writing wasn't already on the wall, it definitely is now, especially with Google's hands sort of being forced with this Microsoft ChatGPT partnership. So I think, the AI wars have begun, but the data sourcing and the citation battles have yet to be started. And I think that's going to be the ultimate sort of determination on how marketers can play up their marketing strategy based on the outcomes of all of these different tools entering the markets. But it is a new information war that we have entered into. And speaking of going to war, this weekend, the Chiefs and the Eagles are facing off in Super Bowl. I think it's 57. I saw that. ChatGPT gave me that answer. So I'm going to blame ChatGPT if that Super Bowl number is not accurate, but the teams playing in it is absolutely accurate. I don't have to tell you that, the marketing is obviously going to be a big play with the Super Bowl. And first, some numbers for you. I didn't get a chance to cite off any of these numbers during the FreightWaves Now discussion, but I thought that some of these were really interesting because from Marketing Brew, a survey of 1,050, Jesus, Vegas brain, survey of about 1,000 people, U.S. adults, recently conducted by Marketing Brew and Harris Poll suggests that viewership could be on the track to continue in an upward trajectory. And in fact, 3/4, 75% of women said that they are likely going to watch the Super Bowl this year. That is up from 62% who said the same thing last year, and then 50% who said that they did in 2021. So of these survey respondents back in 2021, 50% of women said that they were going to watch the Super Bowl. Then it ticked up last year to 62%, and this year it's up to 75%. So the women are coming out in full droves, and that also is in addition to, I mean, I think award shows are kind of past their heyday as well. But if you think about, the Emmys and the Oscars and the Grammys, all three of those markets combined does not equal the amount of women that watch the Super Bowl. So the amount of women that watch the Super Bowl is more than all three of those other events combined, which is crazy to think about. So it keeps going up as far as the viewership numbers are concerned. Another cool stat for you, about 3 in 4 likely viewers said that they were at least somewhat excited about the ads, compared to 71% that they said about the halftime show, which is, Rihanna is the halftime show. So I don't know what you guys are thinking. Rihanna hasn't dropped an album in a while. So this is what we're going to be looking forward to. Let's just collectively just go ahead and say that watch the halftime show. Rihanna is an icon of an artist. So I think that she's going to knock it out of the park. So a lot more people are interested in the halftime, or a lot more people are interested in, not a lot. I mean, it's about 5% point differential. So 75% of people are somewhat excited about the ads versus 71% who are excited about the Super Bowl halftime show. While 84% said that advertising during the game is a smart investment for brands, 65% said that there are more effective ways than advertising during the Super Bowl for advertisers to reach consumers. And so I thought that that was I thought that that was interesting, because the Super Bowl is the only place that I look forward to the ads. It's really incredibly tough to use the bathroom during the Super Bowl, because I want to watch the game and I equally want to watch all of the commercials. One more interesting study that was from this same survey is that these folks are tired of the commercials being released before the actual game. And they want the anticipation of watching that live with their friends and family, and not knowing that, hey, maybe the marketers in the room, like myself, who have seen already a lot of these different commercials, you want to experience that all together, because sports is really like sort of the last bastion of being able to watch a live event all together, and the commercials play a big role in that. So that's kind of a note to brands. I think save the juice for the actual game itself, and then you of course can release the commercial out into the rest of the world, the rest of the internet world, that is. And then another cool point that I wanted to bring up is, I said during FreightWaves Now that FedEx was hosting or had a commercial during the Super Bowl. That was wrong. FedEx is actually only investing in TikTok ads, or they're collaborating with TikTok artists in order to create these co-branded events around the Super Bowl. And so FedEx seems to be taking a similar approach this year, tapping several TikTok musicians to perform during halftime of playoff games in lieu of a Super Bowl spot. So check out TikTok if you want to see some collaboration in the freight world going on between FedEx and a lot of the creators there. TikTok also has a guide to the Super Bowl and to Super Bowl ads in general. And what they kind of proclaim is that while FedEx on one side is only doing, those TikTok collabs, there are other brands that are doing both. They're doing the Super Bowl spot, and they're also collabing with folks on TikTok. So Doritos seems to be taking that approach this year, having posted a TikTok dance challenge earlier in the month, in which participants can win $5,000 and a chance to be featured in its primetime ad, which will feature rapper Jack Harlow. So that's another little note. Doritos has always kind of had like a really strong marketing game when it comes to the Super Bowl. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of collab with both the TikTok side, the TikTok audience, and then also with the Super Bowl audience. Because speaking of that TikTok audience, 57% of TikTok users watch sports content on TikTok every single week. I'm one of those, and TikTok is 1.2 times more likely to be the sole focus while using the app, which I 100% get, because you can't, TikTok is one of those apps, unless you're watching it live, you can't exit the app and do other things. Like a podcast, you can press play on a podcast and you can do other things with your phone. Or if you're watching TV in the living room, if you're watching Netflix, you're probably playing around on your phone as well. TikTok is one of the few places, maybe the only place online, where if you're engaging with that app, you're not doing anything else. And so I thought that was an interesting takeaway too. Sports content is big on every single social media platform, but I personally, anecdotally, have noticed a much stronger uptick in the amount of sports content that I have seen on the app, especially over the last year, and especially compared to when I first joined, which was when a lot of people joined, which was during those initial sort of lockdowns during COVID and all that stuff. So TikTok continues to grow, continues to be a powerhouse. I don't know if it's going to get banned. It might get banned, but the concept of the creativity and the content that's being created on TikTok, I think can be replicated on a variety of other channels. We've already seen it with Reels. We've already seen it with YouTube Shorts. YouTube Shorts is something personally I'm going to be investing a lot more time into because YouTube has a clear path for creators in order to move them into a long form funnel. So say for example, this content that you're listening to right now is long form content. It's, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour long. And if you think about it from the lens of short form video leading into the long form content, it's almost like a content drug dealer where you just want to give them a little bit of taste with the shorts or with the reels or even TikToks and then lead into that long form content. Right now, the only ecosystem that can really support the long form content is YouTube. And so putting more money into YouTube, putting more time and investment just makes a ton of sense. A few more numbers that I want to get into with the Super Bowl or with respect to the Super Bowl. These come from Wallet Hub. The average cost of a ticket to the past 5 Super Bowls is over $6,000. Could you imagine paying $6,000 to watch your team play? I don't know what it is about Jaguars fan. I've never really had to answer this question before. Maybe we'll be answering that question here in the coming years, especially with Trevor Lawrence and Dougie P. So, but that's a side note. Yeah, definitely a side note. But I could not imagine paying $6,000 to go watch my team in the Super Bowl. To me, if the Jaguars ever make it to the Super Bowl, if it's in the state of Florida, which is a good chance because Miami, Tampa, probably never Jacksonville again. But if the Super Bowl is ever held in those 2 areas, maybe Atlanta, I would think about going to the game. But if my team is in the Super Bowl, I would much rather watch it at home, watch it with sort of what I like to call my football family, the people that I have been going to games with and, cheering the team on all season. More than likely, all of them are not going to be able to afford a $6,000 ticket to go to the Super Bowl. What are you going to sit with like a bunch of, just non-football fans? Or you want that energy. You want to feel that energy of your team being there. And you really can only experience that by watching it with the same people or in the same environment that you've been watching it all season long. So $6,000, God bless you. I'm not doing it. I would much rather watch at home with the family and the friends. So another cool number, 1 billion is the estimated economic impact. So some people are going to Phoenix because that's where the Super Bowl is being held this year. So there are lots of people going. 1 billion is the economic estimated impact for the greater Phoenix area. And an interesting number, too, is close to 18 million Americans plan to watch the game at a bar or restaurant. Now, if it's around 100 million folks who watch the Super Bowl, 20% of that audience, or a little bit less than 20% of that audience, going to a bar or restaurant in order to watch it. I think that that's primo for, a lot of these different restaurants in order to offer those big game day extravaganzas, offering the ability to book a booth for the entirety of the game and, being able to reserve that, having a prefixed menu with, different kind of Super Bowl fun fare or, drink specials, things like that. There's a lot of opportunity for sports bars, restaurants, in order to play around with that many people. Around 20% or a little bit less than 20% of the overall Super Bowl viewing audience wants to go out for the game, which was a little bit higher than I thought it would be. And then the last number I'll give you is a 204%. That is a 20-year increase in the cost of a 30-second Super Bowl ad, hitting a record this year of $7 million for a commercial in the 2023 Super Bowl. $7 million. What would you do if you had $7 million? How could you spend that money? As a marketer, I could think of a lot of different ways that I could spend that money and really tackle, for lack of a better phrase, tackle my marketing efforts. If I had if I had a fraction of that budget, you guys would be sick of me. My content would just be like carpet bombing everywhere. Content carpet bombing is probably the way that I would use a fraction of that $7 million for one 30-second ad spot. Another cool thing that I do like to watch during the Super Bowl, and I don't know if any of you guys out there like to do the same, but I'd like to see the first ad right after the halftime show, or the first ad right after kickoff, or the first ad right after the national anthem. Those are my favorite ads to see, because even though you have this, $7 million price tag, if you are the first ad that's shown after those key moments in the game, then you are obviously paying a premium. You're paying more than this $7 million average. So I like to see the different companies and how they prioritize where their ad is going to be placed during the course of the game. So if you're anything like me, then you'll pay attention to that as well. So that's another thing that I am looking forward to. Whew. I talked for about 30 minutes already about, ChatGPT and the arms race, AI arms race and Super Bowl stuff. So let's get into, final topic. Manifest, the future of logistics. You can kind of hear it in my voice. You heard it especially initially during this conversation. But Manifest is a hell of a conference. And it's safe to say that it is now the industry's premier event, must-attend event. I've said it on this podcast before, and I'll say it again. It is the only place where you can see a true expo floor of all of the technology that is powering the global supply chain. So not just from the autonomous trucks, warehouse robotics. You're also, I connected with the team that builds the LiDAR cameras that goes on the autonomous trucks. These, you didn't even think about it, but the autonomous trucks, the part that really powers it is not just, them being environmentally friendly or EVs, all that yada yada, but the LiDAR cameras on the sides of the trucks and around the trucks. These companies are not building those. They are using other companies to manufacture those LiDAR cameras for their trucks. So I'm working on getting an interview with the manufacturer. He's going to come on the show and talk about it. And I'm just endlessly fascinated by LiDAR, not just from the, a trucking standpoint, but also from an archaeological standpoint. We're discovering a lot of things all over the world using these LiDAR cameras. They're discovering whole entire civilizations in the Amazon rainforest that has, just been overgrown with hundreds of, sometimes thousands of years of, forestry that's grown over these ancient civilizations. So I am big fan of, LiDAR cameras. So I'm super excited to get them on the show in the future. But looking at our show calendar right now, we are booked solid for the next 60 days. So we have a lot of really great content, not only coming out of the conference, but coming out of the connections from the conference itself. So I only visited the puppy booth. I'm sure maybe you've seen some photos, or I don't know if I'm sure about it, but I know I've definitely posted about it. They have, for folks who haven't seen it though, they have an area of the conference expo floor where it's just puppies, and there's a line to get into the tour, but you could just kind of stand around. You can kind of watch them play, or if you want to stand in line like I did 4 times, then you can actually get in there and lay on the ground, and like these puppies come and just crawl over you and they play with you, and they're so sweet. I had one that actually fell asleep in my lap. It's the best thing, because when you're talking about a conference now the size of Manifest, there were over 3,000 people there. That's more than double the amount of attendees that were at the previous year's event. They're going to be doubling the conference next year, especially the expo floor. I think they're going to have 2 expo floors next year. So, I mean, seriously, block that off on your calendar for next year. I think it's February 5th to the 7th. And it's happening same place, Vegas, Caesars Forum, which is their convention center area. But imagine all of the people that you have to talk to, not have to, but you're talking to during the conference, and you just need a break sometimes. And that puppy booth, I took 4 breaks in that puppy booth, because then you go into it, you get your little serotonin boost. I think that's the right way to probably phrase it. Serotonin. Yeah, I'm thinking out loud here. But if you get to hang out in the puppy booth area, it's so much fun. You can even adopt the dogs if you want to. They'll make arrangements for you to get the proper, the carrier in order to put it on the plane to take the dog back with you. I know a couple people actually put in applications for the puppies there, and it's such a great thing that it creates what Manifest, Pam Simon and Courtney Mueller, they put together just an incredible show, and they really focus a lot on these different areas of conversation. So it's not just, the demos and the industry talks, which we can hear, really at any other conference, but those conversational points of the puppy booth area or the beer garden or a caricature that you could, or a headshot. You could do all of these different things all around the Manifest Expo floor, and it creates these conversational moments that you typically wouldn't have anywhere else. You might not run into these people that you were sitting next to in the puppy booth, or you might not run into these people if you're sharing a beer in the beer garden on the expo floor. And so thinking about it from that lens, like Manifest really has gone above and beyond in creating those conversational moments that you can have those shared experiences with folks, and then use that as sort of like the kicking off point of going into what you do for work and, your products and services. Oh, hey, I do XYZ. Oh, that's cool. I do XYZ too. And making those connections. And so that's where I think Manifest just shines in creating those unique experiences. I have noticed that other conferences have started doing the same. I can't remember the conference offhand, but I get, it sort of goes to show, but they have now a puppy booth area, beer garden. So it's just bringing more creativity into logistics and supply chain, which, we do such fantastic work within this industry. We're creative problem solvers at our core. So being able to see these different creative aspects being brought into the space is just so exciting. So I can't speak highly enough about the conference. 2 years in a row I have gone. I've had a blast both times, not to mention the musical acts. Ludacris last year, Nelly this year. Shout out to my girl Grace. We got front row. We rushed up to the front and held down the fort with that spot in order to get that front row seat in order to watch Nelly. You can't, obviously you can't go to the bar and get a couple more drinks. You can't go to the bathroom. You once you're in that spot, you are locked into that spot. So hopefully we will be able to hold down the fort at future events. But I cannot say enough about that conference. I had a blast. You can probably still hear it in my voice. But yeah, so it's a conference to attend. Put it on your list, mark it on the calendars, make sure you go to the next one because they will probably double the amount of people. There was about over 3,000 people this time. They will probably double that number for next year's event. They're doubling the event space, so they got room for it, and Vegas is the perfect city to make that happen. All right. Well, that about does it for this week's episode. Be sure to stay tuned to the podcast. We have a lot more interviews. I didn't even mention that, but I recorded a bunch of really great interviews with a bunch of really great folks. We got Maersk coming on the show, the #1 shipping company in the world. We got them coming on the show. With Platform Science, they never do podcast interviews. Got them coming on the show. Also, a company called Furnish, which is more on the shipper side of things, talking about sort of the revolution of what's going on in the furniture market. And when I say revolution, I do mean revolution and what's going on in the furniture market space. So she will break that down. A lot of really great conversations. I also recorded a lot of social media friendly conversations called 1 Minute Logistics, where you have to explain what your logistics company does in under a minute. So those were really fun to record. I'm going to be releasing those over on YouTube Shorts. So if you don't follow me on any of those social media platforms, I've got them all linked over on everythingislogistics.com. You can find all of my socials there. And just, if you're interested in any of those podcasts, just stay tuned to this feed. Go ahead and follow the show. I hate saying this, but smash that subscribe button in order to stay updated with all things logistics, because we got some really great content in the works coming for you. And if you want to hear even a greater breakdown, go check out the conversation with Grace and Lars on your conference strategy. We recorded that live at Manifest. And if you... I'll tell you, skip through the first 2.5 minutes, get to like the 3-minute mark. I think it's around the 2:45-minute mark, because that conversation is a lot of fun. I love both of those people, and we have a great conversation, but it does take a little minute to a little bit to settle into the conversation, because we're full of laughs. It's great seeing them all in person again, and that conversation just sort of exudes that. So if you're interested in what our conference strategy looks like, how we tackle the pre, the during, and the post-conference strategy, we lay it all out in that episode. It just should be the one of the more recent episodes. So go back and check it if you are, or if that is of interest to you. But that, I have babbled enough, and I lasted a lot longer during this conversation than I thought I would. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you to it. Thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Go Jags.